happened was two things changed, I think, by the early 2000s. One was clearly that generation of the left had itself degenerated morally and intellectually, abandoning their initial interest in broad systemic questions and commitments to working people and their lives, to essentially now shifting towards various forms of identity politics. So this was, in one way, you could say, an abandonment of radical scholarship. If by radical we mean what it's always meant, which is you go to the root of things, and the root of modern society is capitalism. But they wanted to call themselves, their self-image was still radical. Now, these are all people who want to be professionals, they want advancement, they want career success. They have no connection to movements anymore, none. So they want a radicalism that's consistent with their professional ambitions. And they want a radicalism that's consistent with their worldview. These are the two things you have to match. Their worldview by now is one that's that of an upwardly mobile professional. And their ambitions is to go to the top universities, which are entirely controlled by people who are wedded to the status quo. So radicalism changes. Radicalism now becomes a radicalism that uses the language of oppression, domination, justice, and all that, but ceases to link it to broad systemic issues and refashions the liberation, the goals of liberation, to the impediments, the blocks to upward mobility of people who are in the professions but not getting everything that white men are getting. So now radicalism becomes removing barriers to mobility, the key of which is discrimination, bias, things like that. Working people don't say, I suffer discrimination. They suffer exploitation. But upwardly mobile professionals, they in fact suffer discrimination if they're women. They in fact suffer it if they're black. They in fact suffer it if their sexual, their gender identity doesn't fit with the dominant one. What happens, therefore, is radicalism becomes mainstream. Because these are the people who control the syllabi in Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, right? Mm-hmm. So now, the first thing that happened was radicalism changed from a confrontation with capitalism and a desire to study the history of capitalism to a confrontation with discrimination, marginalization, frustrated ambitions, things like that, right? So that's the first thing. So now, the second thing that happens is the universities make it part of their brand, the top universities. These universities now try to attract students from wealthy families by saying, not only will we give your kids an education, but we're going to teach them to be better human beings. And the way they'll be better human beings is by understanding oppression. We have courses on activism, et cetera, right? So you get not only a shift biographically and institutionally in the intellectual orientation of radicals, it's given the stamp of approval by institutions, powerful institutions. Well, this means if you want to get a job in cultural studies and gender studies and race studies, you're going to have to talk that oppression talk. But the content is going to have to be one that's acceptable.